Hi guys, this is Jenny, and today I'm gonna talk about the male incarceration, the marriage market, and female outcome by Curvey and Main Chain in 2010. So, first of all, let's talk about the table of content. I'm gonna briefly explain the context and why this problem is so important. Basically, this paper studies how rising female incarceration has affected women through its effect on the marriage market. Over the past 3 decades, the number of Americans who got into prison more than tripled. Rising incarceration rates may thus lower women's marriage probabilities, and women may take actions to increase their economic well-being. However, it's so hard to say that anything about recent increase in incarceration and its effect for the following reasons. So, firstly, although rising in incarceration levels have coincided with a nationwide reduction in marriage, it's not clear that two phenomena are causally linked, and incarceration may affect the male behavior that could have independently affect marriage outcomes. And finally, without some way of controlling for various confining factors of this sort, it's so difficult to say that anything about the possible causal effects of incarceration. And now, in the next slides, I'm gonna talk about the 3 identification strategies. This paper's main innovation for dealing with these difficulties is exploit the fact that the overwhelming majorities of marriage occur between men and women in distinct markets. It's defined by the interaction of race, age, geographic region, as well as using a variety of estimation strategies, including difference and fixed effects models and TSLS, which is two-stage least square models, and using data on marriage markets over time. This paper estimates a series of panel data models that exploits variation in marriage markets over time. With self-reported data on drug offending, this paper finds suggestive evidence that changes in incarceration over time refer to not changes in male behavior, but rather than change in policy. Then isolate variation in the change in incarceration rates with marriage markets attributable to a specific policy, the handling of drug cases following the initiation of war on drugs. In a series of two-stage least square regressions, this paper then uses policy measures to account for any endogeneity associated with changes in incarceration, as well as for the effect of measurement error. And in the next few slides, we're going to talk about the research design. So there's 4 parts of research design in this section. The first one we're going to talk about is the basic fact about incarceration and marriage markets and predict theoretical effects. It is summarizing the changes in incarceration over the past few decades, with particular attention paid to those patterns have differed for different types of men. And for the next one, we have the empirical framework. So this part is basically describe how the empirical framework is worked, and we have the equation designed to understand the relationship between men and women. And for the results, here we have the models, graphs, in order to illustrate how male incarceration has effect on the marriage markets. Last but not least, we have our conclusion. So this part, we're gonna conclude the findings and recommendations for this paper. And now I have found some tables, charts, and equations to better illustrate this paper and the main definition. So here we have this graph. So most of the analysis in this paper is conducted on data from various census, IPUMS from 1970s to 2000. These figures reveal several facts, so we can see in this graph. So first of all, for all races, most of the increase in incarceration between 1970s and 2000 occurred after 1980s, and especially after 1990. The trends in the main indicates that the post-1980s increase occurred across the country rather than in a select set of states. And finally, the graph reveals how markedly the incarceration experience of young men has differed across races, both average in time and in any other particular year that incarceration draws disproportionately from lower portion of the schooling distribution for all races. And in this slide, we have the empirical equation. This assumes that the structural relationship between the outcome, which is here, Y and T, for women in marriage market is M, and in time is T. And the male incarceration as here, J star MT for men in the market is given by the equation 1, so we can see the relation between men and women in the marriage market here. And now we're going to talk about the two-stage least square TSLS. So in table 1 here, you can see a lot of stuff. So this part mainly focuses on criminalization and greater punishment of drug offenses, the war on drugs, as known in table 1 here. We can see here the evidence that drug case laws positively affected the 1990s to 2000 change in male incarceration is so strong. This evidence strongly supports the notion that increases in incarceration arising from the criminalization of drugs in war, of drugs in the war of drugs, principally reflected the effect of the policy of criminalization on policy rather than behavioral change. So in K1 here, we can clearly see that all the TSLS estimate of the effect of incarceration on women marital outcomes are of the predicted sign. And same as in table 2 here, in all cases, incarceration has risen and married women are falling sharply. So overall, taking the mean across races and across specifications, it appears that somewhere around 30% of the decline in marriage across the population appears to the result of male incarceration. And next we have our table 3. So this table shows it is very consistent with the notion that higher male incarceration, by virtue of the negative effect on marriage outcomes, induce the women to engage in behaviors that raise their levels of economic independence. And this result is too consistent with the marriage market model. The presence of fewer men means that fewer women marry at all, but those who do are more selective, and their marriages are more stable as a result. And now we have our table 4 here. On the whole, these results are qualitatively quite similar to those presented earlier we have in the slides and in the paper, and in no way change our main conclusions. And now we have our final conclusion. So in this part, I'm gonna show some results and some recommendations for this paper. So here we studied how women has been affected by rising male incarceration levels over the past 30 years. Instead, there has been tremendous variation in rates of incarceration across men and different races, locations and age, and also great variation within each of these categories. And secondly, we show that the most marriages occur within relatively narrow marriage markets, defined by the interactions of race, age, and location. And these results show strongly that higher levels of male incarceration lower male marriages. Our findings regarding marital sorting are less definitive, whereas many of the points estimated indicate a tendency for women to marry men of inferior quality when they do marry by standard marriage markets model. And the effects are either not statistically insignificant or only weakly so. So here we can see that I put male incarceration and marriage market together under the race, location, and age. And yeah, that's the reason why I just explained it. And in this paper, we can see where observable controls for market characteristics such as the state welfare payments have a little effect on our estimate. And the evidence strongly suggests that declining male labor markets opportunities in markets with rising male incarceration plays an important role in explaining female marriage market outcomes. As here, you can see that the male incarceration rate increased as the female marriage rate decreased. And last but not least, we have our recommendation and question. So in this paper, it also argues that the results presented here should be part of the debate about the societal wisdom of increased incarceration. And any questions, you guys can just send me emails. And thank you guys for listening, and hope you all have a great summer. Bye!